Okay, it's 6:01, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Anacortes Planning Commission to order. Ms. Gleichman, would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Mills,
Present.
Commissioner McCombs,
Present.
Commissioner Ryan, Commissioner Martin,
Here.
Commissioner Stoneman,
Here.
Commissioner Jaretsky,
Here.
Commissioner Courier.
Here.
Would somebody like to make a motion regarding Commissioner Ryan? To excuse. We did last week, so yes.
I would like to move that we excuse Commissioner Ryan,
Okay.
make his absence excused.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to excuse Commissioner Ryan for tonight's meeting. Number 2 on our agenda are the minutes from June 26, 2024. Are there any changes? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes as written from June 26, 2024.
I second that motion.
Moved by Mr. Stoneman, seconded by Mr. McCombs to accept the minutes for 6/26/24. All those in favor, just signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. All right, item number 3, public comment. This is a time for anybody in the audience or online to speak about any item that's not on the agenda. We will be happy to have you come up. You have 3 minutes. We ask that you say your name and your city. Any online? Okay, seeing none. Item 4 is public hearings, and we have no public hearing tonight. So we are on item 5A, revised Skagit County 2045 allocations of population, housing, and employment, and Anacortes land capacity analysis, 2025 comprehensive plan update. We have Mr. Coleman.
Good evening, Planning Commission, members of the public. My name is John Coleman, the Director of the Planning Community and Economic Development Department. I need a moment to try to share a screen here. So members watching online can see what we're looking at. So before I jump directly into the revised Skagit County 2024 allocations of population, wanted to give just a brief overview of what our schedule is going to be for the next 2 months. We have an ambitious schedule. You can see that we've up on the screen here. I have a simplified schedule of what we're intending to bring to the Planning Commission over the next 2 months. We have a special meeting today, we have a regular meeting next week, and then we're going on October 23rd when we would have our normally scheduled Planning Commission meeting. In lieu of that, we're having an open house, and so we've been getting the word out on that. And then 2 more special meetings, and then November 13th, a regular meeting, and then we're tentatively scheduling a November 20th special meeting, if needed, to discuss anything that we haven't gotten through over these next several weeks. So we already talked about what we're going to do this week. Next week on the regular meeting on October 9th, we're going to be getting a presentation from our transportation consultants, talking about the transportation element goals and policies. So that'll be the first touch that the Planning Commission has had on anything transportation element related. So be prepared for that. Largely put together by consultants, so be prepared to ask them questions more so than us on this one, but we're definitely helping bring that to them and coordinating with them to make sure that they're presenting what the city intends to be in our transportation element. So similarly, like we've done over the past couple of weeks, they're going to present the element goals and policies section, the changes there that are necessary because of changes to state law and changes that we feel necessary. That's the same thing that we've done with our land use and housing element goals that we're going to be talking about second on today's agenda. So same methodology, just looking at the goals and policies, not the entire transportation element yet. Then the open house, we'll get you more information about that. And then on October 30th, we intend to bring the land use element back, focusing on future land use map amendments. On that day, we're going to have applicant presentations and discussions. So the 3 applicants that have requested zoning changes or to be included in the urban growth area will be here to give presentations and answer any questions as we really start to move forward, with the process of determining if we're going to make any zoning changes or if we're going to recommend to include the Signal Hill property in the urban growth area. Then from that, we'll come back on November 6th to continue discussion of transportation element, goals and policies if necessary, and the land use element, including future land use map amendments as necessary. We kind of figure between the transportation element presentation on the 9th, there's a lot there, so you may want a second touch on that before we have the public hearing on November 13th. Same with the land use element and the housing element. We want to give plenty of opportunity for the Planning Commission to review those before we have a public hearing on November 13th. Again, as I described last week, the Planning Commission is not going to be asked to make final recommendations on transportation or housing or land use goals and policies, but we're looking for, like, yes, we're all going in the right direction. We'll bring it back next year when we reconcile with all of the elements to make sure that they're comprehensive. But we will be asking for November 13th for some sort of final recommendation on the UGA expansion request. So that's a quick bit of business on that. Clicking the wrong buttons here. So tonight, what I wanted to get into next is what's on our agenda, the revised Skagit County 2045 allocations of population, housing, and employment, and then move on to how that affects our draft land capacity analysis. Hopefully that's still viewable by everybody online. So, if you can remember back in February, we gave a presentation to the Planning Commission about the initial 2045 allocations of population, housing, and employment. So those are the figures that you see here. For Anacortes, we had a population estimate of 17,983. And so that's our 22 population estimate, and we're anticipating an additional 4,988 people between now and 2045. That has not changed. So these final numbers are all the same for the population projections if you remember, Skagit Council of Governments made that initial recommendation back in December of 2023. We've been using that to try to make sure that those are the goal, the projected population that we're doing all of our analysis to make sure that we can accommodate between now and 2045. So all of these comp plan amendments are based on these population projections, and the final numbers have not changed as far as population projections. Similarly, for employment allocations, the estimate in 2022 was that we have 9,503 jobs. We're anticipating another 3,145 jobs for a total of 12,648 jobs coming to the city, total in the city in 2045. Those numbers have not changed either through the final allocations. So what happened between now and 2023 when Skagit Council of Government Steering Committee made their recommendations on this is they sent it out to all of the cities for us to review and say whether or not we can meet these allocations that SCOG has identified, and we've all done so, and everybody's able to accommodate the projected housing and employment growth. But when we break it down by housing, we ran into, the county ran into a problem with their 0 to 50 AMI, area median income allocations. When we, in December of 2023, gave these recommendations to the Skagit Council of Governments and what they ultimately approved, we had identified that the county could only take 10% of the 0 to 30 and 10% of the 31 to 50% AMI, because we know that in rural areas that in the county, they can't accommodate multifamily housing. The 0 to 30 and 31 to 50 is almost entirely accommodated by multifamily housing. There was at that time some allowances within the Department of Commerce guidance that said you can accommodate some of that 0 to 30 and 31 to 50 through ADUs and other types of housing that isn't multifamily. But in the ensuing months, Commerce has changed their tact. They came out a couple of months ago with revised guidance that says pretty succinctly 0 to 50 cannot be accommodated in anything that's not multifamily, and because counties can't build multifamily housing in rural areas because you're not allowed that type of density under the Growth Management Act in areas outside of urban growth areas, that their guidance from Commerce is now all 0 to 50 AMI must be in cities, and counties can't account for it in their rural areas. Some counties may have urban growth areas that can accommodate, that are in the county and not necessarily a jurisdiction that can accommodate multifamily, but Skagit County doesn't. We don't have any urban areas outside of our cities here. Bayview has a little, but not so much. And you can see that they've, in these figures here, they've eliminated any 0 to 30 and 31 to 50 AMI housing in Bayview Ridge. They've pretty much zeroed out Bayview Ridge for many reasons that is kind of not necessarily everybody agreed on, but that's what SCOG ultimately and the county wanted to do. They also eliminated all the housing allocated to the Swinomish tribe because that being tribal land, they don't, the county doesn't really have the authority to allocate housing to that area, so that has been eliminated from, the Swinomish has been eliminated from the allocation, so that gets zeroed out too. although these numbers are not showing that it's zeroed out. But it says allocations for the Swinomish urban growth area provided for informational purposes only. Skagit County did not conduct a land capacity analysis for this UGA due to jurisdictional challenges on tribal lands. So what that happened, that process is the houses that were previously residences that were previously allocated to Swinomish were redistributed throughout the county and the cities. The 0 to 30 AMI and 31 to 50 AMI housing that was previously allocated to the county in any sort of rural or Bayview Ridge or Swinomish has been redistributed to the cities. After they did the math, as I tried to explain in my staff report, that results in 19 additional houses, residents in Anacortes is 0 to 30 AMI, an additional 12 residents in the 31 to 50 AMI. Commensurately, we reduced our 120 and above AMI down. So what happened is basically the cities and the county traded 0 to 50 AMI in the county. They gave it to the city, and then the cities gave a commensurate amount of 120 and above to the county, because in the county, you can only build, because of the rural needs and lack of urban facilities, they can only accommodate housing in the 120 and above AMI. So 31 of our 120 and above was reallocated to the county's housing in the 120 AMI. So none on the grand total line down here, nothing has changed. It's just been reallocated around the jurisdictions in the county. So just wanted to bring that to the Planning Commission. I'll be presenting that to the council already also, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to address them.
Let's just pause for a second. Mr. Dretsky?
Just as a point of reference, the last time this was all done 2 decades ago, how the actual numbers or the estimated numbers where we are today match up with what we thought was going to happen 2 decades ago? You've done a lot of work based on this need to provide this information. I guess my question is, how accurate was our estimates 20 years ago?
In 2016, we did the similar exercise, but we didn't have, you recall, we didn't have housing allocations. We just had to look at our projected population. So that was for the time horizon of 2016 to 2036. If we extrapolate out, to 2024, not all the way out to 2036, do you know off the top of your head? I want to say that the county as a whole was pretty much on that trajectory. Because of the housing market during that past 10 years, it's been, first it started out super flat. Like, between 2015 and 2016, there was not a lot of housing growth. And then there was a boom. And then as interest rates went up 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, there's been quite a slowdown. So it's been up and down. But we were on target. Not on target, but our estimates were on track for, ballpark.
Thank you.
And if we go back to the 2006, 2005 to 2030 to 2025 allocations, it'd be interesting to check. I haven't looked at that.
I think it's very close to where we're actually at.
And the county's been consistently using the medium trend. So the way these numbers, these allocations, you look at this figure here, the grand total of population in Skagit County and 2045 is 160,830 people. That is based on the Office of Financial Management gave us 3 potential scenarios: a high, a medium, and a low scenario. This is pretty close to the medium scenario. It's a little bit below the medium scenario. And that's what we chose. That's what the county and jurisdictions chose in 2005 when they did this process, and again in 2015 when we did this process.
So just to summarize, so the population growth is based on, I think, in my opinion, solid data, and it sounds like from the past as well, solid data in the methodology. And just for the public's sake, to just get it in our heads, we're projected to grow by more than 27% in the next 20 or so years. So 27% growth, 1 in 4, that's quite a bit of growth, and it looks like pretty solid data to me. Now, we're also projected to have 33% growth in our jobs. I don't know what that is based on.
Similar forecasting done by our consultants, by the Skagit County's consultants for looking at ESD data and jobs growth over the past, I want to say 50 years. They looked at more historic, but they definitely put a weight on the more recent past. Because 75 years ago, growth isn't really all that relevant, but it's useful information.
Right.
That is available. That is probably on the Skagit Council of Governments website, growth management, their growth management assistance information page. If we don't have it, we may have it on our 2025 Anacortes page also. If not, we can get it up there.
You have the methodology on the website, on the city website. I'm not sure. I think that the economic one is also there, because it shows the most growth in places like government, health. Those are the areas that are projected to grow.
Yeah, I apologize. These are just the final numbers. This doesn't have the fine grain information, but that is available on the Anacortes page. And I'm always going to continue plugging. If you want to see all of this 2025 comp plan information and you don't want to navigate through our website to try to find it, you can just type in planacortes.org and it'll take you right to the 2025 comp plan page, which is updated almost daily.
Any other questions? We'll keep on going.
All right. So thank you for reviewing that part of this. So what this means is now that we have these final employment allocation or final housing allocations, what we can move on to is reviewing our comprehensive land capacity analysis. So we presented the land capacity analysis to the Planning Commission, and we had a presentation May 22nd from Leland and Associates. They're the consultant group that put together this methodology. So we had them double check some figures we had them import these revised housing figures and measure them against our land capacity and the zoning designations that we have to make sure that after these changes to the allocations, which were pretty minor, to be honest, in the grand scheme of things, a total change of 31 units, it did not have a significant effect on our ability to handle the amount of housing. So in this land capacity analysis, it starts out talking about where the areas, I'll take us to the final figures with the new housing. So they updated the net new housing needs based on the revised allocations, and that's on page 6.
Would you like, I have some questions as we go along, or do you want them at the end?
I was just going to bring up to the point where it shows how much that we can accommodate the projected housing growth, and that's this figure here. They're showing at our current zoning standards, under the assumptions identified in this methodology, the number of housing units in each band, we can accommodate 2,942 new units. We need to accommodate 2,942 new units, and we accommodate 3,589. So we do have enough land without changing our zoning or expanding our urban growth area to accommodate the projected growth. Some other changes that we made to this document is what is developable. I know we had a few questions about what is developable and what is partially developable. I'm looking for that map, I apologize. If I scroll through quickly here. There was not seeing that map as I scroll through, I apologize. There was some allocations in the Skyline area in the R4A zoning designation that was shown as largely redevelopable. But those were all built on with single-family homes over the past 30 or 40 years. So they're perfectly serviceable houses. So they're in a nice neighborhood, but because it was zoned as R4, the way the analysis looked at it was the land value was so significantly higher than the value of the house because of the type of zoning that it was showing that those houses it would pencil out for a developer to demolish those houses and redevelop that land. We did not agree with that, and so our reconciliation process, we had them remove those areas from being identified as redevelopable, and that resulted in a significant drop in the number of the amount of housing that we can accommodate overall in the city. But again, we still have plenty of surplus. And here's some of the fine data about how much housing we can accommodate in each of the area median income bands. The long and short of the amendments that we've made to the land capacity analysis is that we still can accommodate our projected growth in both employment and housing without having to make significant changes to our zoning designations, our zoning densities, or expanding our urban growth area. That's all I had to present, so I'm happy to take questions.
So I looked at the version 3 draft, which was May 28th, and I think you've now spoken to this. So in version 3, in that graph that shows the green and the
Yes. Apologize, I don't have the pages memorized on this.
It's on page 16 of
There.
that document that you
There
have,
we go.
right there. So it shows on this new one, 3,589 units capacity, and on the previous version, it was 4,369. So 780 less units available between the two drafts. Is that all because of Skyline?
Largely, yes. So it was an R4 area, so they're making assumptions that a certain amount of it would develop at R4 densities, which I think we made an assumption was about 15 units per acre. So if you remove all of those acres that are dedicated to single-family housing now, and we expect it to remain as such for the foreseeable future, then, yeah, it removed many, many acres of redevelopable land, which dropped this number significantly. I think he may have made some fine tuning to the assumptions also, but that big drop was because of Skyline.
And then, question if you guys don't.
We were surprised too when we saw how much it dropped.
That was a huge
It
change.
was a huge change.
Yeah, and not for the better, actually. All right, and then on, earlier in the document, page 6 of the document, it's got the net new housing units needed in Anacortes, and, yep, that one. The question I have about that is, even though the 31 units don't seem like it's a huge amount, that permanent supportive housing added 7 units to that, and then the 0 to 30 added another 12 units. So it's not in the 31 to, or the 0 to 50 so much as it's in the 0 to 30.
Well, so that's 19 units.
Right,
So we were reallocated 19 units in the
Right.
0 to 30 and another 12 in the 31 to
Emergency.
50. 31 to 50.
yeah, you got 19 units in the 0 to 30. You have another 12 in what they call emergency housing, and then you're subtracting 31 from the 120% plus.
Yeah.
So can you talk for a second about the difference between permanent supportive housing and non-permanent supportive housing? That green, that first bar? What does that mean in terms of, what is it going to look like?
So permanent supported housing is housing that is run by, think of the Anacortes Family Center, where they offer support to the residents that live there. Non-supported permanent housing is low-income housing, but it doesn't come with, services for, mental health and job, helping find jobs. So non-permanent, non-supported permanent housing would be like Anacortes Housing Authority, where they just provide low-income housing, whereas permanent supported housing is like Anacortes Family Center, where they're providing counseling services, job training, those sorts of things.
Thank you.
And then, of course, emergency housing is its own separate. That's like drop-in. That's not permanent. That's beds for people that need it in an emergency situation.
And so, do we have any, I know we have an idea, and I think I might have the idea, but I can't remember. Do we know how many housing units we currently have that would be considered permanent supported housing or non-permanent supported housing?
Yeah, and I believe is that not on this document? I'm looking over in Libby's direction.
I think
Right.
she's given that to me in the past, but I don't remember.
If it's not in this, it's in more of the fine-grained data that is in the HAPT tool, the Housing for All tool provided by the Department of Commerce that we have to use to come up with these different allocations for each. And I want to say it's 29, either 19 or 29 jumps out at me. Permanent supported houses, homes
I
now.
thought there was something that was 200.
Or am I thinking of emergency shelters? Emergency shelter beds? Maybe I'm thinking emergency shelter beds. I apologize. I can navigate to our website and
That's okay. I just was curious
that
about
data's
that.
there.
I think I
Sorry,
had
I was really
one
just
other.
prepared to talk about the differences between this one and the previous draft.
Oh, I have one more thing. In the final document, page 21, and 22 is the last document. I think just found a couple mistakes. Figure 17 references Port Orchard, but I think it's the right number. I think it's just the wrong city. And there was another one. I can't find it right now, but
Yeah, I see, no, it's right here.
Yeah.
It says Port Orchard in figure
Right.
17 title. Okay.
yeah. So the final needs to be just looked at again. There was another area where they had the original, like the version 3 numbers, the 577 at the 120
Okay,
plus instead
Thank
of the
you.
546, but I can't remember where it was.
that's why this is called final draft.
Yeah.
Thank you for the technical support on that.
Yes, Mr. Stoneman.
John, just in your, like, the final wrap-up of this, it kind of seemed like you were saying we're already zoned appropriately to meet the goals that we want to meet. So do we need to change anything? Are we changing things just because we can?
It depends on the goals of the Planning Commission and City Council. If you'd like to see changes in the community, it doesn't mean that we can't make changes to increase the amount of, for example, there's nothing stopping us from having a surplus of land in the R4 zone, for example, where we can, that might encourage more multifamily housing to be built, for example, if that's the goal of the city. So we can overproduce, we can have a surplus of area available for the various types of housing, but we can't go below it. So we still have, within these bounds, we still have the ability as a community to identify how we'd like to see our future growth. We just need to make sure that we meet these housing requirements as we do so. So the answer is yes, you can change zoning designations and densities and whatnot as long as we don't drop below our required. But technically, no, we don't need to do anything.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Okay. Looks like, Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Chairman.
I saw a raised eyebrow.
Couple of questions. On page 6 of the final draft, there's a list that continues on to the next page of 15 or 20 county use codes, or in the county assessor's use codes, that are excluded from our analysis. Most of them make logical sense to me, but I'm trying to remember from the presentation back in May, the logic for why use code 150 is excluded. Almost everything else is land that is not housing relevant or useful for housing, but use code 150 would seem to be usable for housing.
It says when appropriate, too, so. So this would be mobile home parks.
Right.
Can anybody think of an example of a mobile home park in Anacortes?
Yes. On Yorkshire, Devonshire, there's a mobile
Oh.
home park.
And down just south of the airport.
I don't think that meets the
the
definition
top
of
of
a mobile
Skyline.
home park, though. That's a subdivision that allows manufactured houses versus a mobile home park where somebody owns the land and rents spaces, pads. There was one out by the ferry dock, and it was replaced by San Juan Passage years ago. But I think that one was grandfathered because the city has never really welcomed mobile home parks.
So if it doesn't exist, we don't need to exclude it.
Yeah, there was quite a battle on 33rd, 34th and D when a thing called Meadow Vista went in about allowing manufactured houses on a very long one-block stretch, even in the city limits. There was a strong feeling against manufactured housing. And again, those are fee simple, that they have people own their own lots, which is different than a mobile home park.
My understanding of reading this is not that it's saying we can't have mobile home parks. It's saying that in the analysis, we're excluding no mobile home parks. So if we don't have any, there's none to exclude.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that might have been.
Probably
Yeah, we can
boilerplate.
go back and
We
look
can
at the
double,
details.
we'll definitely double check that. That's a good question, but yeah, just thinking off the top of my head, I just double checked one of the properties off of Devonshire, which those are largely manufactured home park.
They're all manufactured
homes,
there.
but I didn't see that 150 code on it.
And it could be that this is a cut and paste problem from something a list they used for other
Right.
jurisdictions where it might be relevant. On the next page, we list parcels that were removed manually. And the first item is common areas of condominiums. Shouldn't that read common areas of condominiums as well as homeowners associations?
So yes, I do know that we did exclude common areas of condominiums and other types of development that have, shared open space areas or native growth protection easement areas. We went through and excluded those. So that could be added to clarify.
I know you're the,
Next thing
since
I
I
have
know
is
you,
on,
since I know you're on a HOA committee, it looks like there's several taken out. Can you tell in your neighborhood if there's any purple where you have?
I can't tell, but I think there's 5 common spaces that are not only HOA owned, but open to the public.
But are not developable for housing is the key.
Right, they're too
So
small.
we can double check those. Yeah, thank you.
Actually, in my neighborhood as well, there are 3 parcels, one that is a kind of park, and 2 that are too small to do anything else with. But I don't think they're on there.
Yeah, I'm just zooming in on this PDF. This is not like a GIS layer that I can zoom in with any sort of granular detail. So we'll look into that before we present to the city council over the next, probably in a few weeks from now.
My next item is page 10. I don't see a table number on it. It's the parcel classifications version 4. Hoping it'll show up. No. Yeah, the key says that the MJB property is supposed to be purple, but I don't see any purple where the MJB property is.
It used to be. Yeah, thank you. Good point.
Just wanted to prove I was reading it.
No, it is discussed in the details of the document. There's a section that talks about how the MJB properties were handled. Hopefully, this is just an error on the map.
Yeah, it's included elsewhere in the document. It's just that map doesn't graphically show it.
It wasn't earlier ones, we know that.
Probably in May.
Actually, I looked too, and I didn't see it in the May one either.
Oh, no.
Not in the version 3. It might have been in previous versions.
Okay, well, no matter, we'll fix it.
And for the good of the cause, on page 20, I think we have in the second line, figure 15, just repeated, not the figure itself, but the reference to the figure. It says figure 15 dot figure 15.
To say figure 15 twice here.
Yep.
So does that make it figure 30?
Trying to have value added here, yeah. That's all, thank you.
Oh, I found the old numbers. It's on that final draft, page 23. All of the income bands, there are the old numbers.
The housing needs on
Yep.
figure 18.
Right.
Okay, we'll double check that.
And appendix, whatever.
Needs to be.
Yeah.
There needs to be an appendix included too. Thank you for the thorough review. That's all I had to present on item 5A of tonight's agenda. So if you have any further questions.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Mills?
Since I found myself getting out my calculator and striking totals on these columns, would it be useful for consumers of the document to have totals struck? For instance, on figure 18, coming down to the 2942 housing needs and the 2942 aggregated housing needs, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. We can do that. It also helps us check the math.
Exactly.
Okay, so are we moving on? 5B, land use and housing element goals and policies, continued discussion, 2025 comprehensive plan update.
So I'm going to let Libby take over on this. But while she's coming up here, I'll give you the basics. So last week we had a presentation from Makers. Marcus Johnson presented our land use and housing element goals and policies. He gave a presentation on kind of the highlights, And then there is a list of all of those included in the packet for last week. And we asked the Planning Commission if they wanted to go over any of those individually, and you requested that you had some time to look at it, and then you would discuss it at the next meeting. So we put this on the agenda today for you to be able to discuss each of those individually. What we were anticipating is we could go through, and hopefully you've made some notes along them as you've reviewed between now and then. And if there's a bunch there, so if you see ones that are absolutely fine, or you have no questions about, we can just say, let's move on to the next quickly. And we'll just focus on, it seems like a good idea to go just down the list instead of scattershot, but this is your meeting. You can do it however you want. That's what we would have suggested, though. Turn it over to Libby now.
Thanks, John. Yeah, we can just see how it goes and adapt as needed. All right, so I have, no, phew. So, pardon? Okay. And I would do that here. Good. All right, so the first element up for discussion here is the land use goals and policies. And so this is that attachment A that was included in your packet last time. And so, like Mr. Coleman said, we'll just start going through these. And feel free to chime in if you have anything you want to talk about.
Okay, let's, would it be all right if, with the rest of you, if we just sort of dispensed with all of the real formalities and people just could speak when they need to speak as we go through this?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Second that, yes.
Okay, so I'm using the big tracker. There's the smaller one that's in your packet as well as what we're looking at on the screen. So I think all the numbers are the same. The first page says page 14 of 113. Yes? Yeah. Uh-oh. Okay, the one in the packet says 44? Okay, let's see if we can make it work that way. Okay, so page 44 in the packet or page 14 in the big sheets that we were given last time. Anybody have anything on that page? Yeah, I don't see or hear anything. I think.
Sorry, real
yeah.
quick. So the only thing on the one at the bottom, I just was in response to built outcomes. Is that the right word there, built?
Yeah,
Is that about Libby? Is that right?
I think it is. I think they're saying, what the development that was subject to the regulations actually, as constructed or
to
as
be.
built,
Okay.
looks like the
Okay.
result.
Yep.
Okay, I think we can go to the second page then, which is page 45 on the little sheet, or page 15. 15 on the big sheet. Anything on this one? I have on item D up at the top of the page, doesn't have, must be from land use 2.1, D. We've been removing character every other place, so that one is still there.
But maritime character is different from overall character.
Okay.
I don't know.
Could be, I don't know. I don't know what to put other than maritime character,
Charm.
maritime charm. On beyond.
Another suggestion potentially could be qualities, or I saw that was used in another place as
Okay.
a alternative to that term.
I like that. Maritime qualities, is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to get rid of that other bad word? Yes.
Throughout the document, they recommend limiting the use of character because of a recommendation in the racially disparate impact document.
Yeah, that's correct. So the racially disparate impact analysis followed the Department of Commerce's guidance for reviewing our comp plan policies for policies that might cause racially disparate impacts. And in that guidance, it talks about the fact that that term, community character or character, can be misinterpreted as coded language that communicates exclusionary messages. And so that's, that's why they are providing guidance to just remove the term or use another word that is more specific to what the community really intends.
Although we haven't in this document taken out the word character altogether, but
Yeah.
I'd like to say on policy LU 2.2, B, the new language, I think it's excellent. Any other comments on this page? Not. Let's turn the page 46 in the packet and 16 on the big sheets.
Going back to your question now, though, isn't that a requirement?
To take out character?
No, going back to the one you just pointed out, the B, like the way it was written.
Oh.
But I mean, isn't that, I'm reading between the lines, but isn't that mandatory that we do that?
Probably.
Mandatory?
Sorry, which
Just
one are we
that's a
talking
question.
about? We're talking about B?
B, incorporate consideration of physical health, that's the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Incorporate consideration of physical health and well-being into the location design of public facilities. I mean, isn't that already required that we take those things into consideration?
I don't know that there's necessarily anything that requires that. I think this particular sub-policy is taken from another policy down below that is being removed and consolidated into the rest of the policies. But no, I don't think that's necessarily a requirement in the law to have that.
Madam Chair.
Yep.
Just, we had a housing affordability and community services meeting today, and we had a presentation from a new group that formed out of the Kiwanis Action Group, Action Club, where they requested, just in a committee meeting, that we continue to support disabled people in our concepts in our comprehensive plan. And I think that one that you highlighted specifically does so. So we've had, that request, at a meeting. It is what it is. But I think the council definitely is supportive of that. And I know that in 2016, there was a lot of push, maybe not push, but a lot of support for doing so. And so they requested that we continue to support.
So that, I found the other policy where that was taken from, and it's LU 4.5. Which is proposed to be removed because it's being consolidated with other policies.
Okay, so let's just get back to page, boy, I'm gonna get lost, I can tell you that right now.
Starting with policy LU 3.2.
Maybe that's easier to just say, LU 3.2, that's the page.
Yeah.
That's the top of the page.
Sounds good.
Character got crossed out there.
Yeah, I have a question on that one. Actually, I have a couple questions on that one. While preserving the city's historic resources, period, doesn't seem like that gets to what we really want there. I wrote historical, and maybe it's historical and cultural resources, or I'm not sure. And then over on the reasoning for proposed policy change on that one, ideas could be inserted into this policy such as air rights swaps. What is that?
Let me just familiarize myself with this one. So, maintain zoning regulations to balance the need to accommodate anticipated growth while preserving the city's historic
3.2.
resources. Consider techniques to integrate incentives or design flexibility for preservation or reuse of historic structures. You know what, I am not completely sure what the air rights swaps are. It could potentially be like a, yeah, I'm not gonna guess. I will find out more information and get back to you.
I think I've seen that in urban areas like Seattle, where you can buy the air rights above a piece of property so that you protect the view of the big building that you built and have sold views. By buying the air rights, you're limiting the building that's there now to not go into your air rights. So you're protecting your investment, basically. I think that's where I've seen it up on Queen Anne Hill.
So the revised Code of Washington, RCW 1412-220, talks about acquisition of air rights. As in any case which when it is desired to remove, lower, or otherwise terminate a non-conforming structure or use, or two, the approach protection necessary cannot, because of constitutional limitations, be provided by airport zoning regulations under this chapter. Or three, it appears advisable that the necessary approach protection be provided by acquisition of property rights rather than airport zoning regulations. The political subdivision within which the property or non-conforming uses is located, or the political subdivision owning the airport or served by it may acquire by purchase, grant, or condemnation in the manner provided by law under which political subdivisions are authorized to acquire real property. So acquire real property for public purposes such as air right, navigation, navigation casement, sorry, in parentheses easement, or other estate. So it's air rights related to aerial navigation.
To what?
It's air rights related to airports
Airport.
and
And-
aerial navigation.
I think that
No?
yes, there's something related to avigation easements are a thing, and there are many properties over by the Anacortes airport that have easements that restrict the height that they can be built to. But this policy is aimed at historic resources and structures, so I was thinking maybe it's more along the lines of, I purchased the air rights over your building so that that is preserved, and then I get additional density on a different, development somewhere else or some other benefit.
So
But I will look into that.
So it's just air rights like above your property regardless of avigation?
Learn something new every day.
This is a very educational place to be. Anything else on that page? Notice there's a new policy in there. Looks fine to me.
Yeah, and that was one of the ones that council added to the docket for the update.
Okay, so now we're on the page that starts with LU 4.2. It looks to me like the policy LU 4.5, which is the one that's going away or proposed to go away, it looks like it's pretty much covered in LU 4.2. Anything else on that page? Yay for LU 5.1, I say.
Actually, I do have something on that previous page.
Okay,
LU 5.1, maintain and extend the Guimas Channel Trail and waterfront, etc. Why extend it? Why wouldn't our goal be to complete it?
I think you could, excuse me. You could probably say either.
I would say extend is more practical because there's a lot of steps in the process to complete it, but I'd be in favor of complete too.
It does go on to, it continues to say required development to help complete the trail. So it's still encouraging the completion of the trail.
Okay, we're on the page that starts at the top with LU 5.2. I have quite a few the bottom three here that I think we really need to talk about and look at.
So I'm cheating. That one definitely. So the ADU line, I actually like the way the original was written. I feel like that's better than what it was changed to, with the caveat of you can still put which are compliant with state law at the end of it. But I don't know. I think the added words or changed words in that actually make it more confusing. Any?
Oh, I think I can speak to the change. So allow for attached and detached ADUs in all residential districts. That implies just the R zones, residential 1, residential 2, residential 3, et cetera. Whereas the distinction is on all lots that allow for single-family homes. So if there are other zoning designations that are not R, on which single-family homes are allowed, we need to make sure that is the state law, that it's where single-family homes are allowed. So it is intended to expand the definition beyond just residential zones.
Okay.
Which I don't think really applies to us. So I don't think you could build a single-family house in any residential or central business district, or in any commercial or residential, or commercial or CBD.
So currently our code does allow for constructing an accessory dwelling unit on any lot that contains a single-family residence. So it's not just restricted to residentially zoned properties. And so, yeah, so in the CBD commercial zone, anywhere where there's an existing single family, an ADU can be constructed currently. So our current code would be consistent with the change.
And then, so starting on B, it talks about small single-family lots, smaller than 5,000 square feet in medium-density zones. I just think B, C, and D probably need their own conversation. And in fact, I think B is listed, I think, in the HAP plan as well.
What stands out to me on A and B is the specificity. Like, comp plan is supposed to be a little bit more broad than specifically saying what each zone, details of which should be allowed. It's a little specific, calling out, lot size and specific zones. It's not way over the line, but it's a little specific.
And isn't it true, so the original talks about just the R3 zone, and isn't it true that medium-density residential zones would be R3, R3A, and Old Town?
Yeah, Old Town is its own designation, but let's pull that up.
And we don't have an R3A.
We don't have an R3A.
Oh,
And it's designated, we've created it in the comp plan, but we've never created it in the zoning map or in the development regulations.
got it, okay.
And one of the council's recommendations in the, one of the recommendations is that we don't map it on during this comp plan update. So not creating the R3 zoning designation in this 2025 comp plan update.
and put together the R2A and the R2 as well.
So that's the R2A, R2 and R2A is the R, that's not RM.
There are both, but a little further
Oh.
into the packet, they combine them.
Right. The R2 and R2A both exist as zoning designations on the zoning map. I believe they're separate from the residential medium density.
Yes. They're in the residential low density.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties over. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, so I'm sorry if I may have missed some of that conversation, but I did just verify that the Old Town land use designation is its own separate designation. It's not included under the residential medium density designation.
Do you know what the R1 zone is under
The R1 zone is under the residential low density 1
versus
designation,
different than?
which is different than the residential low density 2.
And which is different from the residential low density 2A.
Well, R2 and R2A are both in the residential low density 2 designation. So the R2 and R2A are the implementing zones for the future land use designation of residential low density 2.
I managed to get confused.
Well, really?
Is Old Town the metrics for Old Town consistent with medium density?
They're similar, yes.
Similar, but different.
Yeah, so the Old Town zone, we can take a look right here. So the permitted density in Old Town is 7 to 14 dwelling units per acre, which is the same as residential medium density. But I think if
Actually,
if our-
I can phrase my question in a more general way. When we use the terminology in this document, medium density, does that include Old Town?
I would say no, but I can see how that could be potentially confusing. So we should probably look at making that clear.
Which is what the original says. Gentlemen, are you fine with A, B, C, and D? Am I the only one that thinks that we need to talk about them? Or at least I think B, C, and D?
I'd be happy to talk about them.
I think that's a bigger conversation, and I think it's wrapped up in the HAP plan for sure. I'm not ready to say these ones are okay yet.
I guess by the nature of my question a moment ago, I see us moving from specificity as to zones to language, which can be confusing as to what zones are included and not included. So unless there's definitionally.
There are definitely definitions, and there's a chart. So definitionally, the broader categories are residential, low density residential 1, which just includes the R1 zone. There's residential low density 2, which includes both the R2 and the R2A. There is the residential medium density, which includes R3 and R3A, even though R3A isn't mapped. And then there's residential high density, which includes here we go.
So this is an attachment B. So this shows the land use designation, future land use map designation, and then the implementing zoning designations.
So we're going to get to that.
Yes.
So
We could also talk about it now.
But it's good for us to understand what these are.
Yeah.
Let's get to the medium zoning density ones, because that's where we keep having questions.
which ones are you wanting?
Pardon?
Wanted to close that.
Okay,
Thanks. Pardon?
let's come back to those three.
Okay.
Let's keep going. Let's see if we can finish. Oh. There's more
Okay,
than
back
three.
to attachment A.
All of this section, the townhouses, the senior assisted living, the walk-up apartments, stack flats, and the live-work units, I think all of those could be discussed at one time, but because I think there's a lot in them.
So maybe we could continue on and then bring those back for a specific discussion at
That's what
the next
I
meeting.
think, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else on that page? Check out LU 6.3 at the bottom of the page.
So this one is just recognizing that in 2019, those development regulations implementing this policy were adopted by City Council. So the language is being changed to say maintain those regulations.
If you look at that one as well, the floor area ratio concept is suggested to be removed.
Excuse me. Yeah, so when the development regulation update, the major development regulation updates in 2019 were going through the process, that was an option that was discussed by the Planning Commission, establishing maximum floor area ratios for new development, and ultimately the Planning Commission decided not to recommend moving forward with that concept because of it seemed more complicated than the benefit that it would bring, and so the decision was made with those regulations to not include the floor area ratio. And so this would just clean up that policy to remove that, although we could always look at it again.
Turn in the page. Policy LU 6.4 is up at the top. Comments on these ones? These ones all look fine to me.
Move on.
I got a head nod, so I'm moving on.
Okay.
Next one has no policy number on the page. It says existing page number 14.
I think these are a continuation of, LU 7.1.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do have a question at the bottom of the page with the new policy. Explore full or partial pedestrianizing of streets in downtown to enhance public experience and economic vitality. I was just trying to imagine in my mind what that would look like. What would pedestrianizing the streets look like?
Well, it could look like closing certain streets to vehicular traffic. So, there's been a thought in the past of closing, like just for example, maybe 4th or 5th Street west of Commercial Avenue, so that it would be more of a pedestrian area where, people could gather and use the entire street. And so that's what that would look like.
Okay, and it's an explore.
It's
So,
explore, yeah.
yeah.
So who knows, what the correct, which streets, would make
Yeah.
the most sense, and ultimately what those details would be.
Right. Else on that page? Okay, I turned the page to the top one is LU 7.2. Just one on that one. Fine? I think fine.
Could you speak into your microphone, please?
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Improve the visual appearance of the buildings on South Commercial. How do you do that short of a LID where it's mandatory like they did maybe up in Leavenworth 50 years ago or something? Or is that only enacted or only required if somebody wants to extensively remodel or rebuild their building?
So this is LU 7.2, strengthen the visual appearance of and economic vitality.
Yeah, I'm just trying
Yeah.
to figure out
So I think-
how do you motivate people to do that?
Yeah, I don't know that it's, necessarily directed just at, existing buildings, but more looking at, codes that can affect how redevelopment occurs along that stretch. For example, in 2019, there were new development regulations enacted that required new parking lots to be placed to the side or to the rear of buildings. So,
So like the Savvy Bank
requiring-
building,
yeah,
Savvy Bank building has parking on the east side of the building and
Right.
no setback on the building from the sidewalk.
right. So having more of a pedestrian-friendly streetscape, by bringing that building forward and having a building design that is either a storefront or having landscaping between the sidewalk and the building.
So those requirements really only kick in if anybody's going to build a new building or replace a building or something like that.
Yeah, redevelopment, new development. Yeah.
Thank you.
It could probably also be things like, benches and flower pots and, street lights, things like that, that would
Yeah.
help to improve the look.
There actually were some, a few years ago, the Parks Department built some planter boxes that you might notice along South Commercial Avenue in various locations that
Yeah.
they have flowers and,
Yes.
and then also I think it was the Anacortes Arts Festival that contacted various property owners and put artwork up on different buildings along that South Commercial Avenue corridor. So there have been attempts to, give more attention to that area. The signage? Yeah, so yes, the sign code was also updated with that last 2019 regulation update. And with that, pole signs were prohibited along that section within the commercial zone. So any new signs are required to be like monument, based signs. Just because of the, pole signs create a lot of clutter and conflicts with street trees, which is also another, goal that I think people have talked about, adding more street trees along the south section as well. So yeah, that's all part of it. Yeah. Call the building department. Yeah, there's various, we do have standards for temporary signs. It's kind of a hard one to, enforce because there are a lot of them throughout town. But yeah, if you see something, let us know.
Okay. I'm turning the page to LU 8.2. We're almost through this. There's more, I know. Trying to be encouraging. Anything on this page? Just one change there.
Can I back you up to 8.1?
Yes.
Is that redundant with the previous LU number regarding
Good catch. I think it might be.
I mean, if we really, really want to do it, maybe we want it there twice.
We can take a look at that and see if it makes sense to consolidate.
Hey, you win the prize if you can find, I win the prize. I can find the original one. LU 5.1. So it might be redundant there.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Did I already say LU 8.2? I think. That one looks just one word change. Okay. LU 8.5. On that page, 9.4, see what you think about that example. I actually don't think it's helpful at all. I think it just clutters it. Do you like the proposed change, or do you like it the way it was?
Kind of either way on that, honestly. Like, I don't think it hurts it to have it in there. John?
Doesn't hurt anything, doesn't add anything. That's what
It actually does add something. For example, indoor recreation. I appreciate that change because when we get to development regulations, I'd like to bring up a conversation about changing our industrial zone standards. Right now, it doesn't really allow for like gyms, small scale gyms or anything like that, and like to have the conversation and see if that's something that the Planning Commission would recommend to change in our zoning code. This would support that.
I think We do have at least one gym that I can think of that's in the
So-
industrial zone.
Might be existing, but it's problematic for anybody else that wants to go to an industrial zone. And in other cities, it's very common for, you know, a small gym where people just need a open space with bay doors that they can open up and turn on a fan and have some people, you know, doing their rope thing or aerobics or whatever, you know, maybe not global gym, some, you know, giant Gold's Gym, that might be a little different, but a place where people can have a smaller scale, 30 people or so, doing some workout stuff. Like, does that have an impact? It's a conversation I wanted to bring up with the Planning Commission, but I appreciate having this in the policies that would support something like that in the future if we wanted to go that way.
Okay, so Mr. Coleman speaks in favor of it. A couple people say it doesn't matter one way or another to them, so I guess
I like it.
you like it?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I mean, a gym, what about like a barber shop or, you know, just, you know, things that are convenient for people that in that area, right? That, so they don't have to drive all the way across town to access those services, things like that.
Okay,
As examples, so I don't think we need to list everything, but unless, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is helpful from a staff perspective to,
Okay.
you know, when we get to that point of looking at what uses should be specifically permitted, because complementary, I know this is a comp plan policy, so they are a bit vague, but that's, you know, pretty vague, and
okay.
the example gives some direction.
All right, and we're turning the page to LU 10. I have a note on LU 10.4. I think I put a note there because it is different to increase access than to integrate. Those are two different things. It's fine, I don't know. Okay, hearing nothing, I'm gonna keep going then. The bottom of the page uses the word character. 11.2, under B, monitor and refine the land use code as needed to facilitate the preferred land use pattern and development character. Want to change that?
Qualities?
Yeah, we can recommend a different word.
Yeah. I don't know if qualities makes any difference to character.
So before you turn the page, at our last conversation under LU 10.1, up there at the top of the page, there was a discussion at the last sentence is that encourage more walking and bicycling between uses. So we had a discussion about, you know, do we want to broaden that? Instead of walking and bicycling, do we change that to multimodal?
Okay, Mr. Millers, you're on for that one.
Addresses my question last week about e-bikes versus bikes and what's motorized, what's not motorized. And so I think multimodal at least kicks that can down the road.
So would you change the wording
I would change it to multimodal transportation between uses.
instead of non-motorized connectivity?
We'll bring something back to you. Oh, non-motorized, again, gets questionable if that means electric bikes or not.
Electric scooters.
It could be,
And I want to make sure that multimodal fits the bill. I would recommend that, but I want to make sure that that's not too broad.
Okay,
Can I take us to 10.4 again?
sure.
I'm not sure. What are we getting at with 10.4?
It's interesting, I mean, the reason they changed it is the meaning of this policy is not entirely clear.
It's still
So-
not.
So they,
trying to clarify.
so they were trying to clarify. I'm sure they wouldn't, I'm sure they wouldn't mind if you took a crack at making it even clearer according to what you, the community wants.
I think we have some fantastic recreational amenities in Anacortes, especially when you look at the open space and the trails and some of the water access that we have. But I think if you talk about public gyms or places to go when it's not raining, there's almost nothing. So is that what is that a goal of the city to improve like a community center where kids can go and do athletics and maybe fix the pool and those types of things? Is that what they're getting at, or are they just talking about more parking at Washington Park? I'm not sure.
Well, this is under the category, the goal of community, of healthy communities, which is to promote land use and community design that encourages healthy living and good connectivity between compatible uses. So that wouldn't, parking at Washington Park, I don't think is where this one was going.
Access, that's why I wonder about that.
Yeah, I can see where there's confusion between access, meaning like access for your car up a driveway versus like one's ability to have access to recreational opportunities.
And just again, I think there's a big difference between increasing access and integrating public recreational amenities, which is what it originally says, makes me think of, for example, on Lopez Island School District, they have a PARS course that belongs to the school district, is open for the community, and it is a recreational activity for everybody. That's more integrating to me than increasing access. Okay, that one's still a question.
We don't know how to help we're with this one because it is challenging to understand what it meant in the first place. So
Yeah.
we were hoping you would do it.
There's the diplomat, integrate and increase.
We could just give Mr. McCombs an action to, go back and rework this
Can
and
we
bring back
rewrite
a
this
proposal.
one, this goal?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can integrate and we can increase, but we're not really sure what we're talking about integrating and increasing, right? Like that's, at least I'm not. So I think recreation is really good for healthy people, but I don't know what we're talking about.
well, and I think the change gives more specificity to who is doing the integrating or increasing access, because it's talking about public facilities, whereas the original policy text just says increase public recreational amenities accessible to all residents and workers. but doesn't necessarily say whether that should be in like private development or public development. So I think the revised language at least provides that specificity.
I mean, does that mean we're talking about new facilities, like encourage new facilities for recreation, or?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think
that
so.
that would be valuable verbiage, right? Especially specifically things to do when it's raining. You can tell I
Yeah,
have
that's-
kids that are school age.
That's a big, that's doing the public engagement, during this, over the summer, I heard that so much.
Yeah.
People want a place for kids to go and hang out, when the weather's bad.
I mean, if you so choose, you could completely throw out this language and say, provide recreational opportunities for people in inclement weather, or somewhere along the lines of something like that, if that's where you want this to be.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want.
I will draft something
Thank you.
to make it more specific.
That. Good job, Mr. Stoneman, assigning it, Mr. McCombs.
Pay for that later. It's okay.
Okay, we're on the last page. And there's no changes on the last page.
No changes. Yeah, there is just that last placeholder where you see the to be determined.
Yeah.
Climate-focused goals and policies. So just a reminder that we'll be back looking at all of these once we've completed our climate work and all of the other elements to make sure that everything is consistent and integrates into one comprehensive plan.
I was actually interested about that, the climate element. I was reading about it, and it sounds like cities have two choices. One is to have its own separate element all by itself, and the other is to integrate it with other elements. So apparently the wisdom is to integrate.
Yeah, we're still not completely sure how that'll shake out and what it will look like. There might be, cross references within, like the land use chapter, might have a section that says, see this policy in the climate element, or whether I don't think that we want to have duplicated policies, within a climate element and a land use element. So there'll be some way to cross-reference.
So I'm not sure if I understood what you said. To be clear, we are creating a separate climate element, but we'll be making sure that the policies and intent of that is consistent and integrated in the rest of the elements of the comp plan. But there will be a separate actual climate element.
Right. I was looking at the guidance from the Department of Commerce, and it looked like there were two choices on how that climate element could be put out. So that, I was just interested in that. The other thing, if anybody is interested, they have over 200 possible policies that people can just pick and choose. We're picking this one or that one, and it's all listed on their website. So I thought that was interesting. I'm sure we will pick and choose some of the ones from the Department of Commerce.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work in that area.
Yeah.
And is that the brand new document that came out like Thursday?
No, it might be updated, but there's been a version of it out for a while. But I know that our climate team was just sent a link to that information today. All right, so
All
I'm
right.
going to close attachment A,
Yeah.
the land use and housing, land use goals and policies. Thank you for your input on that. Okay, attachment B, so this we might not want to get into too much because it's the future land use map changes, which we'll be talking about on, the applicants will give their presentations on the 30th. But there is this section about the land use designations, table LU-1 in the comprehensive plan. So this is that one we were looking at earlier in relation to the different housing types. So do we want to also talk about this one in conjunction with the housing type section that we're going to bring back? Because this is kind of getting at what the community's vision for the types of land use, types of housing will be in each of the different land use designations.
Why don't we just go through kind of quickly? And yes, I think we will need to come back, but
Okay.
just to,
There's not a lot of changes to this one,
Right.
although at one section there's some significant changes.
Okay, so no changes proposed in the residential low density designation, which has the R1 zoning designation.
I do have a question there though, because it says other dwelling types such as accessory dwellings and cottage housing may be allowed under certain circumstances. But aren't ADUs allowed in all of the zones?
Yes, they are.
So that needs to kind of be tweaked a little bit.
Yeah.
So something to the effect of ADUs are allowed and cottages may be allowed under certain circumstances.
Are cottages allowed by right? Or
No.
They're
They're not.
conditional?
Currently, cottages are not permitted in the R1 zone.
Okay.
That is a recommendation of the Housing Action Plan that they be permitted.
Okay. So we're going to talk about that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the ADUs are permitted?
They
or
are, yes.
Are required to be permitted?
Yes, there is some, the Department of Commerce put out guidance about, changing codes to meet the new ADU bill. And there is some language about critical areas and ADUs, but, ADUs, placement of an accessory dwelling unit would have to comply with all of the critical areas regulations that we already have in the code, so I'm not sure how that will play into it, but something that we'll be looking at.
What's interesting is, single-family houses are allowed in the R1, and they're required to meet the critical areas ordinance regulations as well. So there's really not any difference if you say that ADUs are allowed. You by specifying that they need to meet critical areas regulations, it's A, redundant, and B, confusing, because that implies that maybe single-family houses don't, unless you specify that single-family houses also need to. So I don't know how much we want to put into there as far as talking about that, because there just are regulations that require that all development meet critical areas regulations in all neighborhoods.
That's true. I think, though, to be fair, if I'm a homeowner in another area and I'm saying, well, how come it's not ADUs? I have to go through more hoops for an ADU in low density 1 than I would have to in low density 2. Why would I have to go through more hoops in 1? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we could tweak it a little bit.
We'll look at changing the language about ADUs there.
Yeah. Low density 2, took out the character.
ADUs altogether from that, right?
I'd have to think about that.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think you need to even mention it because it's state law that
Yeah.
you're required to allow them.
Except they're mentioned in other places.
Yeah,
They're mentioned throughout, it looks like.
Maybe you just delete it from everything. Why do you have to talk about it? Yes.
So are you suggesting keeping it broader, so like not, not just not saying specifically all of the uses that are allowed? Because, I mean, in some zones, many uses are allowed, and we don't necessarily specify them throughout in this document.
So per the new state law, right, the new bill, ADUs are allowed in any zone, aren't they? Any residential zone? So I don't know that you need to say that they're allowed in every zone. They are.
yeah, I don't know that we necessarily do. And yeah, just to
Maybe
point
make it
out,
less confusing and distracting.
yeah, just to point out too, the beginning section of this table says that the allowed uses and densities herein are intended as a summary of key provisions to guide implementing zoning codes and not as a complete description of all possible uses. So it really is just providing examples. So that could be, we could look at that and look at whether we really need to specify all of those different housing types.
So you either probably put it in all of them or you leave it out of all of them, probably. Under that residential low density 2, I understand the taking out the established character of the area, but I think if you take it out altogether, character of the area does matter. I don't know how you say it a different way.
Can you use your mic, please?
Yeah, use your mic.
That they be of equivalent curb appeal with the existing homes in an area.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Instead of saying character of the existing homes, they said equivalent curb appeal of the existing homes in an area when talking about allowing some townhouses or triplexes, that type of thing. Since you can't use the word character about adding those into a single-family area, I just said matching curb appeal.
Or the established qualities, I don't know, but qualities and character, they make it sound the same to me.
It's a shame that word is, got to be stricken, or we have to
Yeah.
wordsmith something where it meets the same without using that particular word.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, yeah, I mean, what does it mean to you?
Character?
Yeah, in this context, because
well-
I mean, it would be good to be able to describe what that is.
Well, going back before before it was mandated that people could add cottages or ADUs, the argument was, well, this is a single-family neighborhood, so we want to keep it of that same character. I never thought of it as, something that was racially disparaging or I guess you could make the argument, well, if you can put in ADUs, you can bring in more affordable or less expensive housing. And so that helps, not necessarily on a racial, but in an economic context, you're bringing in more affordable housing, whereas people don't want more affordable housing in their neighborhood necessarily with the because of whatever reason, they just want to keep it single family. Again, that argument's been taken away. Olympia made sure we nobody gets to do that.
Say similar quality and style.
Yeah, I said curb appeal. I mean,
That would
those
be,
are the terms I use, but again, yes.
So,
Or design.
I have a recommendation. So what they're trying to achieve is just kind of describe the area. It's not trying to state in any way, like the line that's stricken isn't trying to identify what should or should not be there. So if we say these areas are inappropriate for more intensive urban development due to existing lower density land uses and the area's separation from transit uses and commercial services. So I just substituted with the stricken out part, existing lower density land uses.
well, I like the similar quality and style just because it's talking about mostly established neighborhoods. It's talking about the flavor of the neighborhood and keeping that flavor or character or quality.
Or character. It's so easy to fall back on that one. Isn't
I
it?
know. Anyway, we're just doing a once through right now, and
Well, we were hoping this would be our
we're done, one and done.
done, so we could then bring what you're recommending, and we can revisit after you wanted input on a few things, but we didn't envision going through this a third time with the Planning Commission for additional review. We wanted to get it, your recommendations out there sooner than later, so we could get it out to the public and have a public hearing on the 13th of November. So for what it's worth, it does look like October 9th, we will continue this discussion, which we already had tentatively put in the October 9th agenda.
So we could bring back some ideas for this one, for the Planning Commission, and talk about that at the upcoming meeting.
Okay.
Oh, I was planning on getting to that next.
I don't know. I don't know how long this goes for.
9 is the deadline, but I'm going to suggest that we table the housing one tonight. Yeah,
I'm sorry, that we table it?
table it, because I would suggest we table it because we've met in our teams of 2, but we don't have yet recommendations from the planning department, and I think that's important.
I'm
So
sorry, I meant,
Is that something different?
No, what we're talking about continuing discussion is the draft housing goals in attachment C, not the housing action plan,
Oh,
things
yeah.
that you worked on.
Oh,
Not item 3 on our agenda for the day, but attachment C, which has our draft housing goals and
Got it.
policies. We're hoping to continue through that document tonight.
okay.
And I think what the Planning Commission rules of order say is no new topics after 9 o'clock unless you all agree. My best memory of that.
so we have plenty of time.
So let's just keep going then. We're on second page of residential low density 2.
Yes.
Just a quick question, this permitted density that's listed in each one of these areas, in the land use summary document, it doesn't look like it matches up. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong.
Sorry, which one? Which other document?
The first one we looked at tonight, the land capacity analysis methodology. It talks about density, which is what these are talking about, but it doesn't seem like it matches.
Okay, so this is stating a range of densities, and then each implementing zone has a specific maximum density that is somewhere within that range. And the land capacity analysis used an assumed density for each zone to determine the capacity for housing. And so I would have to, not recalling what assumptions we used for the different zones, whether they were just what is in the form and intensity standards or not. I don't have that in front of me.
Well, for example, it's on page 13 of the land capacity analysis methodology, where he talks about density. In the R2, says minimum lots per acre, 5.8. Well, I guess that's between 4 and 8 dwelling units per acre.
Yeah, so I think part of developing the assumptions that were used in the land capacity analysis was also looking at past trends in what densities are actually being built as well. So that could be a reason that the numbers aren't, exactly matching up.
So for example, if it's, what is it, the R2A zone's 7 units per acre, instead of just saying straight across, we anticipate that all future development in the R7 is going to be achieve 7 units per acre. We'll assume that it's making, it's at 5.8 units per acre, I think.
R2 is 5.8
5.8
minimum.
Which is the historic achieved units per acre.
And then it has something called maximum density, dwelling units per acre, 4. Are we too much in the weeds?
Yeah, if you're finding contradictions, then yeah, you're too far in the weeds.
Well, I mean, where we're going through is from this residential medium density on Appendix B, you were talking about the permitted density is 7 to 14 units per acre. That's, what Libby was stating is that that's inclusive of the R3 and the R3A, which have different zoning densities, even though the R3A doesn't exist.
So on that document, the R3 is 9.7 to R3A is 14.5. They're just different, that's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to go back and refresh my memory on how these were developed and provide a summary at the next meeting to answer those questions.
Okay.
But regardless of the land capacity analysis, I mean, we'll have to look at to see if there was some incorrect assumptions there, but in this document where it says permitted density is 7 to 14 units, that's based on our zoning densities in the R3 and the R3A as written.
Yeah, good point. That's based on what's current, so we're just leaving what's current there. Anybody else have anything they want to say there? So, let's see. We're on to Old Town, is that right? This also has the language about certain circumstances, like the L1 has language about certain circumstances.
So that, I think that that language is intended to provide room when going through the development regulations to, add specific standards or design standards that the planning commission or community may, think are necessary in order for these housing types to be compatible in these designations. So that's why that's a kind of a broad, placeholder for, additional details in the development regulations.
Except that it's by right in several of the other designations, but Old Town and L1 seem like they're special places. What about?
Yeah, so these would be, right. Yep.
So residential high density. Any thoughts here? This one didn't have any permitted densities, and now it does.
Yeah, so on this one, we're, I think Marcus talked about this, but proposing a minimum density for new development in these high density areas on lots that are 6,000 square feet or above.
Okay, I'm turning the page. Central Business District. Looks like everything is the same. Commercial, everything is the same. And I made myself a note about looking at that density from the analysis on this one as well. Marine mixed use, no change.
Sorry. I was going too fast. There we go.
Commercial marine, looks like taking out CM1. Is that the same as R3A? Like there was never any?
There, at one point, there was some land that was designated as CM1, and that was changed to marine mixed use. The specific land was changed to marine mixed use with the last round of development regulation updates. So it did exist. Now there aren't any properties that have that designation.
Okay. Light manufacturing, no change. Manufacturing and shipping, no change. And industrial, no change.
Can we look at industrial real quick?
Yep.
We just need to think of if we do want to allow some more broad uses, such as we identified in the goals and policies section, such as indoor recreation. I want to make sure that this supports that. So we'll look at that.
Okay. Heavy manufacturing, no change. Public use. One is worth looking at.
Yep, so this one is a requirement under the climate bill, HB 1181. And so the public green space is just being added in, and they actually do define green space below. And these are really smaller properties that are less than 1 acre in size that create value through promoting physical and mental health. And one thing that we need to look at, as you'll see down in the next row, are urban and community forests. The climate bill also requires jurisdictions to designate lands that are urban and community forests. And we are looking into whether that requires that they have a completely separate land use designation, or can they be included in the existing public designation that we have. So we'll be bringing back more information about that once we know more.
Okay. Aeronautic.
Harkening back to a previous life, I'm used to green areas be either parkland or open space. That's in a different state. Do we have a definition of parkland and open space already? And now we're creating a third one, which is called green public space? I say we, the state.
I don't know that the state does, and I don't know that our development regulations have a very good definition of those things. I think that that's something that we could work on clarifying in the development regulation updates, is specifying what are open space, what are public facilities.
Where I was headed with that is that I don't see any wording in here that indicates whether or not this public green space is maintained, mowed, trimmed, et cetera. Is it just natural? Maybe the state regulation would specify that for us.
Yeah, this is the definition that we have. Pardon?
Do you not like the definition that's included here as the green space defined?
I'm fine with it, except that I didn't, maybe I read it too fast. I didn't see where it indicated whether this green open space is required to be maintained or whether it can be just wild.
I think it could be either. It's, just land that is creating public value through promoting physical and mental health, or, otherwise protects streams, water quality, even enhancing visual quality along a highway. So I think it's pretty wide open as far as what the actual, what's happening on the land.
That satisfy you, Mr. Mills?
My understanding of the answer is that as far as we know, the state regulation, it can be maintained or not maintained. It's just.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Undeveloped.
Okay, aeronautical zone, through that one. So, what do we have left to do? I can see people yawning. I can see that this is going long and losing motivation.
The housing goals and policies, which is much shorter than the land use goals and policies,
But trickier.
could be.
All right. Ready to take that one on? Somebody's not. I can see. See, how many pages do we have to go through here?
We've already talked about a couple of these too,
Yeah.
in to some extent at the last meeting. Only 6 pages.
I feel like we'll be letting Libby down if we don't do it, so.
I could do a quick jig or
Actually, all
something. to liven things up.
discombobulated here. Can't find my- All right, you can do it quick. Take a deep breath, everybody. Let's see if we can go for it. I can't even find mine.
There you go.
Okay, housing elements. Goal H1. Anything on this page?
Just on H1.3, we have this medium-density residential again. Definitional question.
Question being whether that includes the Old Town?
What R1, what all is it? I know it's not R1. Is Old Town in there or not?
Technically not, because Old Town is defined as its own designation in the previous document that we're reviewing, whereas the low and medium 1 and low and medium 2 are defined as the.
So you can have duplexes and townhouses in L1, in R1?
Well, we may need to look at that. Maybe there's more housing to do than townhouses. We'll look at that
Yeah,
policy, because I think that's, sorry.
Yeah, we should look at that. And we could just be more specific. We are, I think our recommendations, the HAP recommendations are to include cottages in the R1, but not duplexes, townhouses. Accessory dwelling units are of course allowed everywhere.
Okay, so we're going to look at H13 again. Anything else on that page? Okay, next page, policy H19 and following.
I still have a concern that I voiced a week ago. The new policy of trying to incorporate more and more into by right as opposed to by avoiding conditional uses. That's a pretty broad statement.
Which one is this?
It's a new policy on the page we're looking at. Maintain development regulations that permit allowed residential uses by right and avoid conditional uses.
City Council did recommend that one, so.
Expressed interest in such a policy.
They docketed it.
So the document here is wrong.
It was recommended by a city council member and it was docketed.
Oh, docketed. I thought you said adopted.
Oh, no,
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
docketed.
I think I have to go back a page also. On policy H1.4, it's talking about tiny houses. And in the recommendations from the City Council Planning Committee, they eliminated tiny houses as an item to discuss.
The HAP, did you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the recommendation is in the HAP, but the council gave us a list of possible ones, and that one was taken out.
I agree. I don't know if there's any state requirements that say that we have to allow for the development of tiny houses. Otherwise, I might recommend that we just get rid of this goal since that's not something that council was interested in creating rules for.
I would say get rid of the goal.
I'll make a note and look into whether or not we can, and if so, do so.
Okay?
Sorry, policy H 1.4, remove? Is that the
Yes.
direction?
Unless John finds out that we have to have it.
We think that's a bad idea. Tiny houses,
Apparently the council does.
so we make recommendations to them. We're your
I think
advisory,
that-
right?
They can disagree.
It messes up the character of the neighborhood, though.
My understanding of the, sorry. My understanding of the council's, selected strategies that they forwarded onto the planning commission, to emphasize is that they're not necessarily saying they don't want to ever consider any of the other ideas. They just think that the ones that they forwarded on are priorities, given the limited capacity and time that we have during this particular periodic update. That's my takeaway from that.
I think that's interesting, but I think we should consider anything that we think is worthwhile and
Yes.
advise and recommend to the council.
Absolutely.
Do we think it's worthwhile?
My question.
That's mine.
I think it's worth considering. If we're considering cottages, I think we should consider tiny houses. Like, we want to increase density of, if that's the goal, that's one way to do it. You want low-cost housing, that's one way to do it. So I think, yeah, it should be a consideration.
What do the rest of you think?
I agree. We should consider it.
Can someone define the difference between, or tell me the difference between a tiny house and a cottage?
Cottage is defined in our code and a tiny house isn't. John might be able to help.
There's definitions all over. If you look in the building code, it's going to be one thing. I don't know what the definition in here would be. I don't know if anywhere in our comp plan we talk about tiny houses and define them in the comp plan or not.
It might in the housing action plan, but I don't have that
have it.
I think
Matter of finding it.
And also just pointing out that this policy, it already exists in the comp plan. They're just proposing to change that one word
Yep.
throughout. Okay.
Here's my thinking about tiny houses. We have the capacity for the density that we are required, and we have the capacity for the density that we are projecting. Affordable housing is always the question. And are tiny houses a way to get to affordability? That would be the question in my mind, not the density, because we don't need to make wholesale changes here in order to meet our goals and our projections.
I'm gonna say for reference, not that we need to go into it now, but if we, page 23 in the action plan, yeah. It says tiny homes, it says consider defining and permitting tiny homes in as another relative affordability housing option, because tiny homes are uncommon or unknown in Anacortes. The city can potentially create a pilot program that allows limited construction on 1 or 2 sites and partnerships with the property owners, such as religious facility. Regulation considerations, potential categories of tiny homes are shown in the following table, and there's examples. They really do look a lot smaller.
one thing that just occurred to me is tiny homes are also used as a form of permanent supported housing in other jurisdictions. So want to be careful about saying no tiny homes after all.
Okay, so where are we with that one?
I mean, I think we're all kind of saying, just leave it in. It still just says consider. I mean, I don't think we're, you know, I mean, no reason to kill it from our perspective. And again, in terms of priorities from the council or whoever else, if in terms of workload or whatever else, okay, if it's not at the list and you don't get to that, then great, you know. But we didn't just say never ever.
Okay.
So. I think at least that was.
I think we're leaving it. On policy H1.7 and other places is the term high opportunity areas. And if we're going to leave that in, I think we really need to define it, because that does not sound clear at all.
That's fair. I mean, I think what it's getting at is areas that have, you know, parks and schools and, you know, amenities for people that live in the neighborhood. But I think providing more specificity there makes sense.
I think at least on the discussion area here, they're referring back to the racially disparate impact analysis, talking about high opportunity areas. And there's a couple of other places, or at least one other place I think that's got that. It just, I don't know that it should be left in, but if there's some reason it needs to be in there, boy, we need to really define what that means. The next one, H18, the cross out is enhance neighborhood character, and I think we could just say enhance neighborhoods, and you could leave out the word character and still get the meaning.
Like that.
Okay? Like that. policy, next page, H 1.9 is the top of the page. Do you like innovative housing, or do you like demonstration projects of innovative housing? Say that.
I think this language changes to imply that it's no longer demonstration project, because the project, we have examples now. So it's shifting from encouraging somebody to do a demonstration project to moving past that and encouraging more innovative housing that we've already seen.
Well, do we have co-living, land trust, sweat equity, and co-location of housing with public facilities?
Yes. So I can't remember up on D Avenue, what's the name of that development? The co-housing. Right before the bend.
I understand that
Scad-
one.
So that's,
Sorry, I
that's,
can't remember that.
that's an example of co-housing. Land trusts are, been established. Everybody knows, they exist in Skagit County. Sweat equity would be something like Habitat for Humanity, where the owner builds it, or people help build it for them. And co-location of housing with public facilities, that one, I don't know that we have any examples of that, do we?
I don't think so.
And we're recommending crossing off tiny houses?
Well,
It's
the
crossed off?
reasoning, the reasoning says that tiny houses are already mentioned specifically in H 1.4. So, didn't feel the need to mention it there.
Okay. All right, we're just slogging through here. New policy, maintain development regulations that permit allowed residential uses by right and avoid conditional uses. Mr. Mills has already spoken about this. I tend to agree with him. The hard thing is trying to find the balance, because allowing things by right makes it slick, easier, everybody understands, it's fair, all of the above, maybe cheaper. Conditional means that the community gets to get involved and have a say about what they want their community to look like. Might be messier, might be more expensive. I think we got to find a balance.
Yeah, so I'll just say that with a conditional use permit process, our code does have a specific set of criteria that an application, needs to demonstrate that they meet. And if they meet the criteria, then the application, the city has to approve the application. And so, it's not, there are bookends and, standards that have to be applied to those permit types. So I guess what I'm saying is it's, yes, public input and comments on how that project complies or doesn't comply with those conditions.
That's a good point. Yep. But still, there's public comment.
Yeah, public, yeah, right.
Community involvement.
One thing about conditional use permits, that conditional uses and that ability for people to comment is, it's often misleading to the community. So the community may come out in droves and not like it for whatever reason. It could be they don't like the color, who knows?
Yeah.
And they feel like we've had 40 people get up and say we don't want this, and then the city goes ahead and allows it because, conditional use is intended to get comments that are not minor, like color. It's intended to like, oh, you didn't realize that there's, a gas line that goes right through this property and we need to address that. Oh, okay, yes, thank you. That's good community input. We've gotten to a point where, we have enough sophisticated tools to know most of those things. So the community input often is just, we don't like it, and less practical. So then what happens is people feel like we've made this comment that we don't want it, why aren't we being heard? And then they're just angry with the city.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, it goes back to the balance. I'm not advocating that nothing be by right, but where do you draw the line and define it such that it's fair to encourage, it's encouraging development, it's fair to the developers, and still has the opportunity of this this commission as well as city council or the public to have a chance to know what's going on and have a say. Unless you have an HOA declaration, what color you paint it usually doesn't come into play.
But people still feel like if there's a public input process, they get to make that comment and are disappointed when they're not heard. As far as where we draw the line, that's exactly what we're doing with our development regulation updates and this process. Is we're trying to draw the line in a public forum that's very transparent, and not only drawing the line, but then putting all the sideboards on it, saying we're going to draw the line here if whoever develops does this, 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 and this, instead of specific conditions that are requested with every individual permit in the conditional use permit process. Clear part. Conditional use permits do require a lot of staff time and a lot of coordinating with the public and responding to comments and coordinating public meetings and that go to multiple meetings.
Yeah, there's a pre-application meeting, a pre-application neighborhood meeting, a public notice and public comment period, a planning commission public hearing, planning commission recommendation to city council, and then city council makes the decision. So it is an extensive process that takes a lot of time.
I'm wondering if in other municipalities, it sounds like there's only one, it's either or. I wonder if there is a way that, I think what Mr. Mills is expressing and what I'm feeling is for the public to feel like they've been heard. And I understand what Mr. Coleman is saying, and he's absolutely right. I think people pounding on the city council desk and saying, you have to listen to us, and yet, and like you said, your hands are tied. If they meet the qualifications, they meet the qualifications. But somehow or another, people aren't feeling like they're being heard. And that's pretty widespread. So I understand why to make things by right, but maybe there's another municipality somewhere that has something in between, that people can feel like they're being heard, but the process can be a streamlined process and fair. I don't know. Where do we want to go with this policy, though, folks?
This is a landmine, this policy,
Yeah.
because I think your public wants a voice, right? And maybe it's just about the paint color, but I think I think you take away, people don't like surprises in their neighborhood, and you take away their opportunity to make input about that. I think it's dangerous. politically dangerous.
Well, I just put up on the screen the criteria for a conditional use permit. We don't have to read through it, but just so you could see the types of things that a project would be reviewed for.
Is there a way of making the conditional use permit a little less onerous and expensive and still be a conditional use? Maybe that's what needs to happen.
Streamline it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, other jurisdictions have, administrative conditional use permit. But still, it's the same criteria that we're looking at. And so, potentially the same problems arising. But yes, an administrative conditional use permit, requires notice and public comment period, and typically, well, we don't have that process in our code right now, so it would need to be a new process that was created.
So, Libby, is this something that'll circle back, like, later? We could comment on this? Or by right, that whole piece of it?
If we'll be talking about this
Yeah.
particular
You said that the
policy.
city council's considering that. Is this our one place to give input on that specific thing?
This is probably the best moment, but yeah, we're gonna be coming back with some other, land use and housing things. It sounds like the next meeting, if people want to think about this some more.
Just to clarify my earlier comments, I'm not against moving things over the borderline into by right. I'm concerned about moving the line too far because it's easier to move incrementally in that direction as opposed to a broad stroke and then you can't back up. The policy is one thing, it's the details when we go to implement the actual rules and regs. So I'm not against a policy which has us reviewing and trying to move more where it makes sense into by right. But this policy as written reads to me like they're just going to try to move everything into by right. And that's why my concern.
Well, fortunately, there is also a new policy I'm looking for that supports incremental changes.
So run one of the next one.
So, I think they can go hand in hand, is not trying to make major changes, trying to just, at this point, move the line a little bit and incrementally.
I think we should stop there. We've given it our best shot. I think there's still questions. I think this would be a good place to stop, right at the new policy. And we'll just have to take it from there. Because we have about 10 minutes and we have an update. So, and we have tired people.
Thank you for getting through that. Appreciate it.
I didn't ask, is that okay with everybody?
Yes, please.
All right. So, item C, the housing action plan, we're just not going to put that on the agenda tonight, even though I know some of you have done some work on that. So item 6 is the planning department update.
Well, I kind of gave a lot of the update as far as what's happening with the schedule for the comp plan and the next steps. at our meeting on Wednesday, we reported about the climate team, the climate policy advisory team. So nothing new to report there. Nothing's happened with that. I think I reported at the, if I didn't, I'll just report now. The city received a $197,000 grant. Did I already mention this?
Yes.
Well, it's only been a week since we've seen each other, so I guess aside from the schedule, I can't think of, I didn't have any notes for anything new, any other announcements.
Thank you for the update.
Okay. Well, hearing no other, is there anything else?
Yes, Chairman Martin,
Yeah.
not to sound like the sergeant of arms, but I think we had a motion and a second at the beginning of our meeting that we never voted on.
Oh, we didn't?
We voted on the minutes, but we didn't vote on the excuse.
Sorry, my mistake.
Don't want that to
So we
pop
have a
back up.
motion to excuse Mr. Ryan, motion by Mr. Stoneman, and seconded by Mr. McCombs. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sorry about that. All right, and being no more business, it's 8:53, we're adjourned.